stewardship, and life on Earth. Academics on leadership.
I am really interested in leaders and leadership, but I am sick and tired of the fixation on the single individual, on traits, on hero worship, on great men. First of all, it never made sense, and it certainly doesn't make sense in the second decade of the 21st century. You see leadership, as I said, as a system and not as a person.
Leadership as a system.
Systems thinking tells us very clearly that you can't understand a system, a human system. You can't understand it by looking at just one or two or three of the agents of the system. Rather, you have to look at all of the agents of the system and how they're interreacting and interrelating. What we see is that in order to understand leadership, we need to look at everyone in the system, not just one person. And it takes a bit of a focus off the leader and puts it rather on the collective. If we look at leadership as something that towards which everyone in the system contributes, but not anything that anyone does, I think we might increase our abilities, I think we might enhance our experience, and I think we might achieve greater results.
System designs.
When Bailey would talk about designing, he talked in terms of leaping out. And part of the rationale was you begin with the system that exists and you try to move from there to a more ideal system. You almost always find yourself stuck in the limitations of the system that you began to work from.
Social systems.
And once you create a social system, it's not a static something that you plug in. Social systems exist because we live them, we inhabit them, we act them out every day.
System questions.
Is it possible for humans to create the systems in which they truly want to live? And Bailey's contention was yes. For him, it was people have not only the right, they have the responsibility to design the systems in which they live.
System requirements.
I mean, if you're going to design and build and enact a social system, what's it made of? What's the material? I don't know that there's an agreed answer to that. You know, it's communication, it's interactions, it's behaviors, it's a lot of things. It's roles, maybe. To begin to envision an idealized system of the future that actually meets something new, that creates aspirations that aren't confined. When people begin to dream about the what could be's that are the things that will pull them towards what they really care about, then you begin to have a draw, a pull, a something that people can work towards, even if we never completely get there. That's okay, but it's very likely to be better than we could redesign an existing system.
The academic call to action.
I haven't seen anybody dealing with it in the way that I've described it, Kevin. What I feel like is most of the responses have been, how do we try to mitigate the problems as they are and return back to whatever people thought was normal? I've heard very few discussions about how do we take what we've learned and create a new system that is better, more functional, more in tune with what we need.
But my next guest argues this is not about Obama. It's not even about politics. It is about needing a total overhaul of society. Peter Joseph.
I have one of the most important thinkers of our time, Peter Joseph. He created the viral Zeitgeist movies, which then spawned the Zeitgeist movement, which has hundreds of chapters and thousands of members around the world. He also wrote and created a series called Culture in Decline, incredibly important book out called The New Human Rights Movement.
It's the new human rights movement because if you want to change the way people think, if you want to change their general incentives, you have to change the structure that's organizing them. It's very fundamental. It's very simple, really.
Peter Joseph, I founded the Zeitgeist movement, as it's called, which is a leaderless movement that was started late 2008. I basically am a social critic and a media creator, mainly do films to communicate a socially conscious message.
The dictionary defines zeitgeist as the general intellectual, moral, and cultural climate of an era. And even though the 21st century has forced humanity into so many different fractured elements, there's an inescapable need to unify to ensure a future for our species. Talk about the zeitgeist movement as a whole, Peter. You famously created those 3 mind-blowing viral documentaries breaking through some of the most dominating myths that keep humanity stunted, which spawn an international organization pushing for an alternative future. Briefly talk about what the zeitgeist movement is all about.
The Zeitgeist Movement is a global sustainability advocacy organization, and what that means is we deal with 3 primary issues: public health, ecological sustainability, and social stability. And clearly all of those intertwine in a systems context.
And that's to move away from the dominant detrimental values and practices of the current zeitgeist. As far as I'm concerned, the problem is psychological and hence sociological, as we have an outdated global economic tradition in place that literally rewards and reinforces those very problems. Imbalance, conflict, scarcity, exploitation, waste production, maintaining societal problems create advantage, an income-producing phenomenon. My suggestion is we either accept the current detrimental socioeconomic system with all its inherent problems, because it's never going to get much better. They're built in. Or we begin to think more scientifically, out of the box, with regard to prior traditions, realizing that until the entire social system is uprooted and replaced by a system that actually rewards and reinforces ethical practices, balance, rather than literally oppressing them by design, nothing will ever change.
If we alter our basic socioeconomic system, the underpinning of everything that we do, we can call it market economics, we can call it capitalism. If we take that and we modify it a certain way, we can resolve all of the major problems we have in the world today, from poverty to the propensity towards conflict, to the growing and developing mental illness, to the huge lapse of public health. We don't need to live this way anymore if we're simply obtaining the type of efficiency in industrial practice that we're now capable of doing through technological development.
In one of the films, we introduced the resource-based economy to the wider public. Now it's being termed the natural law, resource-based economy. Why the change?
You could basically state that a resource-based economy is any type of economy that uses resources. A natural law resource-based economy denotes 2 things. It denotes the importance of natural law right in the title, which means these are laws of nature. Sustainability and efficiency laws that exist around us that we have discovered that we need to harmonize with in order to be in a steady state environment, which I think a lot of people, when they hear a resource-based economy, they instantly think of one particular version of it put forward by Fresco, who has a kind of a specific design reference, which is less available to open source thought. This is a variation of that, which gives a more open source definition and distinction to allow more people to contribute to it.
So it's not a set in stone.
I am just as singular as anyone else. I might have founded the movement, but people can call this whatever they want. You know, it's a train of thought. It's how you choose to think about this type of design approach and efficiency approach to society. And there are no 100% correct angles or directions. We have these principles, and as technology moves forward, as science moves forward, the mechanisms which will make this happen can be very, very different. So there are very many approaches to this within the bounds of those natural law rules, which are indeed static. There are numerous think tank style projects that I talk about. The earliest individual that spoke of these things was a man named R. Buckminster Fuller. Was how do you look at the world as one unit? How do you share resources efficiently to meet the needs of everyone on Earth? It's a calculation problem. It's a game. It's like a chess game. How do you do it? It's a math problem. And that's something people should think about. And if people are aware of that concept, because no one thinks that way. Everyone still thinks in terms of nations and economies that are localized. They don't look at the world in a holistic view. And I think the work of the Zeitgeist Movement and other organizations are starting to force that view, force that need for a global consciousness. And with that comes the resource consciousness, comes the sustainability consciousness, and everything else.
Poverty could easily be resolved both through financial means and through efficient use of resources with modern methods. But we don't do it. And I really hope people will begin to understand more so that poverty is really just a form of violence coming down from our social system, doesn't need to exist, and we should work to change it. Self-interest must become social interest if we expect to survive as a species.
In the book, you say there are 5 shifts that need to happen in order to increase economic efficiency and to get to this new place, to these new human rights, really.
To realize the technical orientation of what's possible, to meet the needs of the human population, to eliminate war if we simply work together, to share resources, to create almost an infinite amount of energy if we applied our technology correctly. If we actually applied these things from the ground up, realizing the train of thought, there's no argument limit to what we can do from here. It's simply a matter of getting it done. And in my experience, however, as I engage this movement and I begin to talk to people about this issue, I'm amazed at how fast they realize it. You're eventually going to hit an exponential increase of people who want a massive social change. Why? Because they have to have it. Their survival depends on it. If people understand, as the human species as a whole, what's possible, what the real problem is, and what the solution actually is, then it becomes a self-correcting system. The problem is educational. And I think even politicians, even the highest level people in government will wake up to this as well, and eventually the transition will emerge on its own accord.
Peter's call to action.
And I want to encourage people to develop a new system that harnesses the amazing efficiency we've achieved as human beings, as intelligent thinkers.
What system does all that? Nature's systems, a new approach. Academics seem to be saying that what's needed is a system that leads the way. They're searching for new voices that can progress the social designs into a viable organic system. They have exhausted all their academic resources and knowledge, and they're looking for a new approach. Let's see what we can do. The missing puzzle pieces. What if there was a system that could show you how you best function, learn, communicate, interact, what environments you need around you, what your strengths are, what your purpose is, who you are here to serve, and how you serve them? What if this same system could be used as a reliable estimate of how much food needs to be produced per location? How much beef versus eggs versus chickens? What if this system could tell us all about our natures without us even having to know ourselves? What if this system was harnessed for its potential in social system planning and purposes? Human design, BG5, could be the system to do just that. Human design is a blueprint of all of humanity. If utilized correctly, it could act as a foundational building block for which to design our social systems. If we know what the demand from our natures will be, we can then begin to design a welcoming, responsive social order instead of a reactionary one, which would create a win-win situation for both the planet and humans alike. If the system is actually the leader, then perhaps it can show us the call to action can only be answered by the totality of all of humanity.
We have to get serious about where we're headed.